All right, I'm going to give you an update in terms of what went on in Toronto's residential real estate market for the month of November. November is a month that you usually expect to have a higher proportion of properties being sold versus the number of listings coming to the market. So you would expect to have a higher sales to listings ratio. Let's see what happened. First, the slide I'm showing you here is showing us the number of transactions comparing to the same period last year, November 2022. So we had about 17% less transactions overall, mainly led by a decline in terms of number of transactions for condos by 21% comparing to last year, and freehold properties we had a 12% reduction in terms of number of transactions comparing to last year, which is a trend that we've been seeing for the past few months. On the left side of this slide, you will see the numbers for October numbers, just to give you a perspective month over month. Moving on, this slide is showing us the average sale prices for November. So for freehold properties, we had a 1% increase for average prices compared to last year. And for condo properties, we're basically at the same level as far as average sale prices are concerned. And I've said this before that I usually like to compare prices based on the index prices, because that would paint a more universal picture. So the next slide I will show you is the single family MLS index chart comparing November of this year to November of 2022. We basically marked an increase of 2% for index prices. The next chart will show us the same concept for apartments. For apartments comparing to November of last year, we had a decrease of about 1%. Peak of the market was obviously first quarter of 2022 for Toronto's residential market on condos and freehold properties. Next slide is showing us the number of new properties that came to the market. So this year, comparing to November of last year, we had an increase of 25% more properties on the condo side coming to the market, and an increase of 12% for freehold properties coming to the market. That to me tells me that the increasing pace of more and more properties coming to the market comparing to the year prior is slowing down. So as you can see on the left side of the slide, we had, for example, in October, a 43% increase year over year for condos, or a 33% increase for freehold properties. So that increase is slowing down. Moving on, this chart is showing us the ratio of properties being sold versus listings coming to the market. So this year for freehold properties, we averaged 46% sales to listings ratio, and for condo properties, we averaged 30%. If you were to compare that to last year, for condos, we had a 44% sales to listings ratio, and for freehold properties, we had a 55% sales to listings ratio. Now, I want to make one point that I usually say, that if we have a sales to listings ratio of above 40%, meaning more than 40% of properties were sold in that given period, then it would be a balanced market or even a seller's market. The only thing I would say for this month is we also need to take into account normal numbers for that particular month. So for example, for November and December, historically we would see a much higher sales to listings ratio, and I will show you a chart that takes us back 10 years. So I would say, even though 46% for freehold properties, it could point towards a balanced market in a different season, but for November I would say that number is low, and that to me points towards an environment that could be more in favor of buyers who would have more options. Moving on, this slide is showing us the average days it took for a property to be sold. So in November of this year, a property on average would stay on the market for 39 days, which is an increase of almost 18% comparing to the same period last year. The chart is showing you the number of transactions as well as the number of listings that came to the market for the month of November going back 10 years. As you can see, for freehold properties, we had just shy of 1,600 properties coming to the market in Toronto. We had about 740 transactions, which resulted in a sales to listings ratio of about 46% for November. As you can see from the slide, on the right side of the slide for November, we would average for November, going back 10 years, we are always averaged about like 78%, 80%. The lowest was in 2017 for 51%, but the ratio usually would be higher for November going back 10 years. On the left side of the slide, you have the October number. So 46% for November, in my opinion, was lower than in the historical norm. As far as sales to listings ratio is concerned for freehold properties. Moving on, this slide is showing you the months of inventory for properties in Toronto. I tried to divide it in different segments as well, just to paint a more relevant perspective. But overall, for Toronto, combining freehold properties and condo properties, we were at 5.1 months of inventory as of December 3rd. And for detached properties, we averaged about 3.6 months of inventory. For semi-detached properties, we were at 2.2 months of inventory. And for condos, we are almost approaching 7 months of inventory. and the rest you can see from the slide. On the left side, I also provided the numbers for November, first week of November. The months of inventory metric is basically calculating how many months would it take for the current inventory that is on the market right now to be sold based on the past 30 days of number of sales. It's a snap picture of the market on that particular date, but it's a good measure to form an opinion on the temperature of the market. Moving on, this chart is showing you the number of listings that came to the market going back 10 years for condos, which resulted in a sales to listings ratio of 30%. Again, I went back 10 years, you can see that the number would usually hover above 50-60% for November for sales to listings ratio for condos, and this year is a clear indication that there are more options available for a buyer in the market. Moving on, I also wanted to quickly cover what's happening in the residential rental market. So first week of December, we had a sales to listings ratio of 43% for properties that were being offered for rent. And compare that to the same period in November, the ratio was 47%. We are averaging about $2,900 for rent prices, which is consistent with the recent trend that we've had for the past few months. We've seen a slight downtake on rent prices, average rent prices, mainly led by higher supply of condo properties becoming available in the market. Anyways, that's it for my update for Toronto's residential real estate market for the month of November. I hope you find the information helpful. Take care.